Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Man in America. I'm your host, Seth Holhouse. So, folks around the world are enjoying a return to relative normalcy after a loosening of COVID mandates and restrictions. But little do they know that the next stage of this great tribulation is just around the corner. According to my guest today, war correspondent Michael Yon, the conditions are being set for a global famine of unprecedented proportions. At this point, it's unavoidable, especially for Western Europe. If you're watching this or listening and thinking, whew, thank goodness I'm not in Europe. Well, you know that food that you're buying from the supermarket right now? That's most likely from last year's harvest. And since then, America has also seen shrinking fertilizer supplies, soaring costs, farmers going out of business, and a whole world of other issues. So I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but food shortages will likely be coming to a supermarket near you too. But is it all doom and gloom? Well, stay with us to the end because Michael gives an important reminder about the power we all have to overcome this. Look, it's a difficult time we're living in, but I truly believe he's right. So stay with us. And now a quick message from our sponsor. So folks, we all know that we're in for a bumpy ride for the foreseeable future. Much of the world is going through a process that experts are calling de-dollarization, and China and Russia are leading the charge. So what does this mean? Well, the US dollar is a fiat currency, meaning it isn't backed by anything of value. The only thing that really gives our dollar value is its demand around the world. But now, and especially under the corrupt and incompetent Biden regime, the rest of the world is fed up with the Federal Reserve printing money out of thin air and demanding to trade it for things of real value. So though the dollar is strong right now, it's only because people are fleeing the European currencies, and its strength is short-lived. This is why Russia's already backed its currency with gold, and many other nations are expected to follow. But what happens if the dollar loses its global reserve status? Well, for most of us Americans, the US dollar is all we know, right? All of our hard-earned money is completely tied to it, whether it's through the stock market, bank accounts, pensions, 401ks, etc. The value of our dollars, our life savings could literally be wiped out in a matter of months, weeks, or even overnight. And look, I'm not a financial advisor, so please do your own research. But I believe that now, more than ever, it's a good time to consider transferring at least some of your wealth into physical gold and silver. Real world assets have stood the test of time. And I've started working with Kirk Elliott for precious metals. I recently had him on my show. After learning more about him and seeing how he runs his business, plus the fact he's a strong Christian, I felt like he was the right person to partner with. Kirk offers a free wealth consultation where he or his advisors will spend time talking to you and learning what's best for you. So even though it seems like the financial world seems like it's going to implode at any time, Kirk's team will take away any fears and worries and make you feel confident in your financial future. And you can buy any amount of precious metals directly from them or transfer your IRA into precious metals with zero penalties or fees. And look, I want to be really clear. You don't buy gold and silver to get rich. You do it to protect your wealth. And there's never been a more important time to protect your wealth than right now. So if you want to learn more about this, open up a new tab right now and go to goldwithseth.com, or you can call 720-605-3900 to speak to someone on Kirk's team right now. They'll answer all of your questions and take care of you every step of the way. Again, that's 720-605-3900. Also, the phone number and link for that are in the description below the video or podcast. All right, folks, let's go ahead and jump into this interview with Michael Yon. Michael, thank you so much for joining me today. My first question is, where on earth are you? Because every time I talk to you or see an interview with you, you're floating around somewhere in Europe or South America. So where do you find yourself right now?
At the moment, London. I just was in Ireland last week, and before that, 3 months in mainland Europe, for instance, Netherlands and Germany and Austria, Hungary, Luxembourg, Belgium. It's been really taking an inventory of what's going on over in Europe with the energy issues. And likewise now here in London, I mean, the Bank of England is teetering so precariously. It's almost like a drunk standing on one leg in a hurricane. I mean, the Bank of England is really about to tip over. I don't even know how long it's going to last. It's done multiple, let's say, major adjustments. We'll leave that for the economists. as if they're ever accurate. Most of the guys that are the most accurate, have you ever noticed, are not the actual experts. You know what I mean?
Oh, I agree completely. It's like what I do is I have a lot of friends that work in finance or precious metals. And I say, well, what are the elites doing? And I say, well, all the elites are buying gold and silver. Like if you look at the Comex exchange, et cetera, that's the consistent message. It's like they're not putting money into the stock market. They're not buying bonds. They're actually dumping all that, and they're actually just taking physical orders of gold and silver. And you saw the Vatican as of September 30th, even they pulled back all their money from all the
Yeah.
regional offices and everything. So there's something strange coming financially, certainly, which is just going to be, one more, kind of spoon of icing on the cake of overall difficulty. And so, Michael, last time we spoke, we covered a wide range of topics, which I love, getting into all this with you. But one thing that we talked in particular about was just the coming winter. And with the gas shortages coming through in response to the sanctions against Russia, Putin's cutting off gas. A lot of people in Europe, I think, are going to be facing a very cold winter. And so, how about we dive into that? Because last time we spoke, it was still in Ohio, it was 75, 80 degrees outside. Now the winter is starting to rear itself a little bit. It's getting down in the 30s overnight, and it just reminds me, it's like, wow, this is serious. And right now, it's interesting timing because I'm literally in the process of ripping out a useless gas fireplace and installing a wood stove. And I've got mountains of wood I've kind of piled up in the backyard because, even here, I'm thinking I see Europe, well, they're hitting 5 times, 10 times energy costs if they can even get gas. So I'm not going to rely on the natural gas coming in here to heat my home because what if natural gas in America goes up 50%, 100%, 200%? So I'm hedging against that. But I think for a lot of people in Europe, they did not have the foresight or the time or even the supply of wood and cast iron stoves to prepare for this. So what are you seeing on the ground in Europe as they're heading into winter?
Yeah. The people that are paying attention are actually quite concerned. The average person seems to be just out at the bars or something. I mean, I was just over in Ireland for almost a week, and it was still party time. It was unbelievable. And as one who doesn't drink, it's kind of tedious walking down streets when you're like elbowing your way past drunks all the time. You know what I mean? And I'm just like, you know, do you guys realize what's coming? I mean, you are Ireland, but
Yeah.
but so let's go back to mainland Europe. I just spent 3 months there, and my visa ran out, and then I went to Ireland, and now here to London. But over in Germany, they are cutting down so much forest. It's unbelievable. I was talking with Jordan Peterson. I went on a show a couple months ago, and then he came over to Netherlands, and we spent 2 days together. I said, Jordan, when you fly over, we were in Netherlands at the time. I said, when you fly over Germany to your Berlin trip, look out the window. You're not going to believe how much forest is being cut down. I mean, I don't even know how to grasp it except by satellite, right? Because I drove about 1,000 miles through Germany. That would be crisscrossing from Netherlands to Prague and down to Hungary and back to Netherlands and over to Ludwigshafen and here and there. So I was driving all over the place on the Autobahn, and you're not going to believe how much forest was being cut down, right? And I lived in Germany for 4 years, so I've got kind of a baseline, and I was just stunned. I mean, it must be millions and millions of trees, and they're cutting these down, and they're also cutting them down in Hungary, and they're cutting them down in Austria, and in Lithuania, they're cutting trees down and sending them to Ireland. Poland's cutting trees down even while people are lined up to get bags of coal, and so they're cutting these. You run a fireplace, as you know, you need a couple of years to season that wood, let it sit out in the weather and dry out and prepare itself to enter the fireplace. They're cutting trees down that are green and sap filled trees, and they're not going to be able to kiln dry them. That's just out of the question. They don't have the energy, the time, or the capacity. Period. Right. So basically, they're cutting down millions of green trees, untold millions. It must be in the tens of millions. I don't know. You'll have to look by satellite, and it's just not going to work. I have a friend in northern Michigan, right, and he's got a 2,000 square foot home. He's a self reliant guy, as a lot of my friends are, and it for his 2,000-foot home, he tells me he uses 10 to 15 cords of wood per year to
Wow.
heat his home. Most people who use fireplaces only use them for those romantic times or
Decorative.
Thanksgiving, or so they don't really heat their home with it all winter, right? And so they don't really have an idea how much wood is required.
Well,
It's
I'll tell
like
people
he
quickly,
uses
Michael, that so a cord of wood, if I remember correctly, a cord of wood is a stack which is roughly 4 feet deep, 8 feet wide, and 8 feet tall. So it's almost, imagine a stack of firewood that's almost the size of a small car, right? So that's one cord of wood. And if you're saying that, up in Michigan, so I think I'm expecting here in Ohio that maybe I can get through, using 8 to 10 cords to get us through the winter. And we've got a really efficient wood stove. And that's a
right.
that's a lot of wood. And this is seasoned wood. You made a really good point with if they're just now cutting trees down in Europe. I mean, the wood that I'm buying has been seasoned for 1 or 2 seasons. It's been drying out. Green wood is not going to burn very well at all. Like I just don't. What are they
It'll
going to
cause
do?
fires. It causes the chrysit to gather in their chimneys and causes homes to burn. There's a lot of chimneys here, man. There's, in Europe, whether it's Netherlands or Ireland or here in London, you'll see these apartments that have 20 chimneys on the, you know what I mean? It looks like a ship almost. And, but yeah, I mean, when you look at how much wood it takes to heat a home in these sorts of very cold climates over in Germany and whatnot, I mean, that's probably enough wood that's literally the size of the house it's heating. That's going to depend on where you're at, of course, what kind of wood you're burning, and how efficient your stove is, and how warm you keep it. But let's just say, for argument's sake, so that we're in the right ballpark here, you need as much home as wood as is the size of the home you're heating, just to be in the right ballpark, right? Depending on many factors. But so it's a massive amount of wood, and they're just not going to. And keep in mind, many Germans, they don't live in a home that even has a fireplace, or not just Germans, but Dutch and all over Europe, and Austria up in the mountains and everything. They live in apartments. They live in cities. So right now in Germany, they're setting up heating stations, or heating islands, they call them, so that you can go to a school gymnasium to stay warm this winter. And hopefully they'll have enough gas to do it. And keep in mind, they need gas. They need gas to make the nitrogen-based fertilizer. We talked about that before, but and we can always talk about that again. But I don't want to bore people. This winter, when the German tribes, and they are tribal people ultimately, Germany's only been a country since what, 1872, right? If my memory is correct. The sort of tribes and the groups came together. They'll be warming their hands right next to the Somali tribes that they welcomed in. A lot of these people, these Europeans and Americans, do not realize that when you just open your borders to millions of people, it's not millions of individuals you let in. Like, I talk with people from Nigeria, Somalia, and all kinds. I mean, they're all over the place. And I'll ask them, what tribe are you from? Most people never. They're like, "Oh, you understand something about?" Yeah, because like this Nigerian guy I was talking with recently, he says he's from West Nigeria. He said Nigerians don't come and conglomerate with Nigerians. It's tribes and tribes, and they immediately, tribes find each other, of course, and then they have their own laws. They have their own system. They come as a unit, right? And they become their own. I call them anthro-insulas, human islands, right? And these human islands are all over the world. And a lot of these human islands here are quite hostile to their host, right? So we've got that all over Europe. We've got that all over here, actually, in London. Not all over, but in some places. I was in a place last night that felt quite dangerous, actually. And so now we're going into food and energy crisis. And food and energy crisis are kind of inextricable in a sense, not totally, but if you have an energy crisis, then you can go into food crisis, right? And when I say crisis, there's different levels of food crisis. One is the prices are just too high and people just can't afford it, or there's shortages, but you're not really into famine, or that sort of thing. It just causes a lot of heartache and pain, but no actual death, or that sort of thing. But then as you go, keep moving the slider over, you get to the point where it becomes acute, where people really honestly don't have enough food and they are actually hungry. And then some of the traits that you'll see during that period is a lot more people will be on the streets. A lot of people will be out in every famine book that I read, which is about 20 so far. In fact, I put on Locals. Steve Bannon asked me the other day for a list of the last 5 that I read on famine. So I put up 8, and maybe he put it up. I don't know, but I put it on my Locals, and you'll see a pattern in these books. And whatever famine you're in, whatever country you're in, people start just kind of wandering out of their homes. They start migrating. They start leaving to places that have food. It creates that hop, that human osmotic pressure, the push and the pull of migration, and then people start moving, right? And then finally, remember we talked before, I think, how hunger can actually create famine, which may sound inverted, like famine creates hunger. It's like actually hunger can create famine, and the way that it does this is when people are hungry, they naturally start to steal. And I'm not making any moral judgment on people that are hungry and are starting to steal food. They need to eat, right? They got children to feed. I'm not going to call them thieves. I'm going to call them hungry, right? So they start stealing, and then stores close. So it becomes it's a fire that it just creates more fire. And so they start stealing from warehouses, they start stealing from trains and trucks and boats. And so the food stops flowing. They start stealing from farmers. They'll do what's in the Bible called gleaning, not cleaning, but gleaning. And in fact, when I was over with Jordan Peterson in the Netherlands recently, we were on a farm, and the farmer said, "Hey, there's something I've never seen in my lifetime. I've heard my parents talk about it." His name's Jordan. Jordan, I call him Jordan, the dairy farmer. He's an interesting guy. We chat a lot now on Signal, but Jordan is like, I've seen something I've only heard my parents and grandparents talk about. Old people are now in the fields picking up old onions after the harvest. This is called gleaning, and gleaning, which is literally in the Bible using the same word gleaning. This is where about 2 to 3% of the crops, he said, are left in the field after you harvest, right? And so then, local villagers and whatnot will come and collect those. That's where in the Bible it says just leave it in the field and let them come get it. And Jordan said in old knowledge in Netherlands, the farmers also won't. In the Bible it says don't harvest the edges, right? So let the people, like the travelers, let the poor people come and get the food on the edges, right? And Jordan said they'll do that on the corners, and then they'll just let people get whatever fell off the truck. Or it's a lot of food, right? And so if you look on YouTube now, you'll see people teaching people how to glean in the United States, right? And so these are symptoms that a food crisis is building. But let me tell you how this gets to the next step on actual famine. So now you get into this gleaning stage, and hopefully it doesn't go beyond that. But when the food crisis continues to worsen for whatever reasons, maybe it's monetary policy or whatever, you end up in these now you get to the point where people start stealing crops from the farmer before they're even harvested, and one thing leads to another, and they're out there guarding their fields, and then the farmers either go bankrupt or they just leave, right? Because they can't afford it either, because ultimately farmers have a business to run. They have to pay for all that fertilizer, right? And so, and the diesel and everything else, or in the old days, the oxen or whatever. And so the farmers then start to go bankrupt or not farm. Now you go into a real famine. So this is one of the mechanisms by which actual just hunger can lead you into more hunger. It becomes it's a fire. Fire creates war. That's what a lot of us have been warning about in Ukraine since the beginning. You see all these guys talking about, well, they got so many tanks and we got better sensors on the F-35s and blah, 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 blah. I'm like, that's not how this goes. You don't know anything about war. That's not how this goes. You're counting sensors and tank ranges and things like that. This has got so many dimensions to it. It's like a jungle. We got gas flows. We've got, for instance, at any moment now, I expect the Yamal pipeline to be shut from Russia through Ukraine down to Poland and Germany. And right now, as you know, Nord Stream 1, Nord Stream 2 was never open anyway, but Nord Stream 1, Nord Stream 2 have met some magical ending through sabotage. And now Russia has, and I'm not saying Russia did that, by the way. All evidence points to us. I don't want to say us as in we Americans. I want to say some subset of Americans who are doing very terrible things. And also it looks like Russia, not looks like, I mean, Russia definitely just cut off a pipeline that goes through Austria down to Italy. There was another refinery issue over in Austria. There's all kinds of apparent sabotages and overt sabotages going on. I would say keep your eyes on, for instance, the Norwegian flows, which come here to the UK and also go to mainland Europe. There's multiple pipelines there that are highly vulnerable. There are you're not going to be able to make fertilizer out of all these ridiculous windmills that are everywhere, right? Which are taking up farm space, and all these solar panels, just millions. Don't get me wrong. I have solar panels, not a lot, but I've got about 5,000 watts because I realize that we're probably going to end up in a situation where we just can't afford electricity or we just don't have it, right? And so we're going to be dependent on ourselves to stoke our own fireplaces and to keep our own lights on. And so the energy issues, energy and food are kind of the same thing in a sense, right? Food is energy for us and our animals and whatnot, right? And energy, when you have a severe energy crisis, it leads straight to food crisis, right? Because, for instance, or it can have a slow flash to bang. But for instance, in Europe right now, they have a diesel shortage, right? And the diesel, it's only getting worse. It's not getting any better at all. And they become more and more vulnerable, especially as this war in Ukraine escalates. Or it's not, where's the war? Is it Ukraine? It's all over the place. I mean, if you look at last night I was checking out the ruble versus dollar and ruble versus euro. I mean, look at the rubles getting stronger. So we got all these so-called leaders saying how we're devastating the Russian economy. I'm like, how are we devastated? They got plenty of food. They've got plenty of fertilizer. They got plenty of energy. It's cold Russia. And guess what? They're going to be warm this winter, right?
Yeah.
And in Europe, where I spent 6 years, I spent 4 in Germany and 2 in Poland and running all over this place. And so I'm quite cognizant of how cold it gets. I remember in Poland, when I lived there, it was right when the transition to communism. That was back when they burned coal a lot, right? And the coal, you could always smell it. You could smell it there, and you could smell it in Czechoslovakia back when it was Czechoslovakia and Romania and all. It was, and if you in Poland, like in downtown Warsaw, that cold air, the smoke kind of hangs on the ground in a lapsed condition, right? And if you brushed against your car, I mean, you needed to wear dark stuff, man, because there was so much coal. The soot, your car would just be black. I mean, it didn't do any good to wash it. You know what I mean? Even if you just sat there and didn't drive, it would just blacken up, And
like
so
a
that's what
volcano
we're
had
looking
gone off locally.
Oh, now imagine they're burning green wood across Europe this year, which is, the greens.
So much smoke coming off of that from all that moisture. And
if they
you
even get it going.
Yeah, the buildup
Yeah.
in the fireplaces, which is going to cause issues. And so, Michael, speaking of just the overall topic of the wood, and so help me understand with, the ramifications of them losing their natural gas supply. So say a family in Germany that doesn't have a fireplace, or say they have a fireplace, but maybe it's a decorative one, or even a typical fireplace is so much less efficient than a wood stove because all that heat just goes straight up your chimney, right? Whereas a wood stove, it heats up itself, the metal heats up, it radiates energy into the household. So say a typical family in Germany that doesn't have the means to properly heat their house, and, they may, like, for me, we've had natural gas for as long as I can remember, right? And so you turn on the heater, your house heats up. So is it just going to be a situation where their gas price has become so expensive that they can't afford to turn their gas on? Or is it going to be that they turn it on, there's just no gas there? How's it going to play out for just, your typical family in Europe?
No gas, zero gas. I mean, right now, Germany has been saying, hey, we've got 85% of our tanks are filled for the winter. But remember, those levels are set with the idea that the gas continues to flow through Nord Stream, right? And through other, like Yamal and others, right? But the gas is simply not flowing at any rate that it used to flow at, right? And so they're just not going to have enough at any price. And remember, this goes directly into this gas, not electricity. This gas is required to make nitrogen-based fertilizers using the Haber-Bosch process, right? And so, which is something that Mike Adams talks about all the time, and something I've been talking about. And I mean, it's the Haber-Bosch process. I've been over to Ludwigshafen at BASF, the plant, which first started doing this in roughly 1913 to 1915, depending on when you want to count that they really started. They started building their Haber-Bosch process plant in 1913, and they were really cooking literally in 1915. So these extra 4 billion people we have on Earth were here because of the Haber-Bosch process. Natural gas. You can use coal gas too. They do that in China, but mostly it's just natural gas. And that's all. And actually, interestingly, there's plenty of natural gas. Like here, in about 4 hours from me up in Blackpool, there's a lot of natural gas in the ground. They're just not pulling it out. They're doing the same thing that's happening in Texas. We got all this energy across the United States. And we should have our own energy security. It's under our feet, right? But the Greens and the other globalists and whatnot have, through political means and information warfare, closed the pipeline. Over in Netherlands, there's a place called Groningen. In Groningen, they have all the natural gas they need to keep Netherlands going, and northern Germany and BASF plant, right? And all you got to do, the infrastructure's there. It's pumping right now, but at a very low level, right? All they have to do is go like this, and they will have enough. That's
They're
it.
not doing it.
It's not like they have to go out and drill deep and build some infrastructure. Just go like this. And it's all political. This is a clear, I call it a gigacide, a giga meaning billions. And this is way beyond mere genocide. It's very clear that along with these clot shots and all these other things, they're all adding up. These clot shots are clearly compromising people's immunities. And that's one of the things that famine does. That's why I keep telling people, read on famine. Most of the people who die in famine do not die from starvation. They die from disease. They die from what's called famine fevers. One of the major ones is typhus, which you can get from lice, you get from fleas. And huge numbers of people die from these famine fevers, right? And they're easily avoidable, although typhus is wildly contagious. So I mean, you need to really watch your P's and Q's. But you can definitely avoid it if you know what you're. It's like a marked minefield. I spent years in the wars, and there's IEDs, mines in the ground, and people step on them. If you know where it's at, it's quite easy. You just walk around it. You know what I mean? But occasionally people would step on them, and quite occasionally, actually, including around me. Even after we clear them sometimes. And so the point is if it's a marked minefield and you know where they're at, they're easy to avoid. And cholera is one of those. Cholera always comes hand in hand with famines. It comes hand in hand with pretty much every sort of disaster, but it's easily avoidable. It's waterborne. It comes from a bacteria, right? We've known that since about roughly 1854, roughly. And there's actually a great book on that called Ghost Map, which I read. And the Broad Street pump where this cholera outbreak was coming from in 1854 is not far from me here in London. I went to see it the other night. They removed the pump handle. So if you ever hear epidemiologists saying remove the pump handle, they're saying what John Snow did in he's the father of epidemiology, was, hey, I think it's coming from this pump. He made this map, and he's like, and he's interviewing people all over the place. And, like, what's going on? Back then, everybody thought that diseases were mostly caused by something called miasma. Miasma is very bad smelling air, right? That's where the word malaria came from. Malaria. Actually, we know the vector is mosquitoes, bad air, malaria. They thought it was miasma. So for centuries, everybody thought, the miasma. Because if you've been to cities that don't clean up their stuff, and I'm going back to famine, like I spent a year in India. Let me tell you what, first time you're in an honest miasma. I mean, I remember the first time I was in India, I was like, whoa, it's like an emotional experience. It's not like opening a refrigerator that's been offline for a week or two. It's like opening 10 million of those, right? You're just like, oh man, I'm in a straitjacket, of olfactory attack, and I was thinking there must be diseases in this air. Well, that's what our ancestors thought for centuries. And so because people just, garbage wasn't picked up, right? And they would use streets for the gutters for sewage and that sort of thing, stink, terribly. And that's where cholera comes from, is bad water, right? It's a fecal oral route. But once you know that, one of the problems with cholera is when you drink water that has cholera, this doesn't have it. you start to get dehydrated. So what do? You then drink more water, right? And so then you die, right? And so but cholera, as long as you know that, hey, that water's got cholera in it, I can still drink that water. That's got a lot of cholera, no problem. I'm going to go boil it. That's the only water I got, and I'm going to drink it.
Well, that
It's no
comes back
problem.
to, I mean, how are you going to boil it, right? Because if you don't have gas
Exactly.
coming into your home,
Exactly.
how are you going to
Exactly.
boil your water? And so, and looking at just the kind of practical nature, and to me, it's astounding that it's not just that. So in Europe, it's not just that, okay, gas is going to be twice as much. So instead of say $300 or 200 euros this month, it's going to be 400, 500. If it just doesn't turn on. So in an area like in Northern Europe, where say it gets down to, pretty consistently well below freezing, what's going to happen? Like, how do you see this actually playing out? I mean, will families just freeze to death, or will entire
Yes.
villages come and huddle in a gymnasium where they're heating? Which, it's like, how can you do that? And they talk about a way to spread disease, if there's any kind of people that are diseased from a weakened immune system, if they're all sitting in a giant gym together, that's a recipe for disaster. But I mean, just looking at the practical level, and do you think people are going to die from freezing to death in Europe? And how many do you think? I know it's a hard thing to put a number on, but if you think there are going to be deaths, which it seems that it makes sense there would be, what kind of numbers do you think that we were expecting, and what scale of disaster is this going to be?
I don't see how they'll avoid it, actually, at this point. Um, because as somebody who's been in a lot of cold weather, I was in the 10th Special Forces Group. So we trained for cold weather, and it was quite cold, that training. And you get on a first name basis with the realities of cold. You can't tough through it. You have to use your brain through it. And cold is like a thinking enemy almost. I mean, cold, it's just like a magical, cold is always plotting on you, right? Well, I think what you'll start to see within a couple of months is you're going to see reports of people burning their furniture. Because in all these books that I read, about 60 on pandemic, 20 on famine, hundreds on war, and of course, spending years in wars and places like this. I I know what's coming next is reports of people burning their furniture and people dying of cold as we get into December, January, February. There'll be people dying, and their immune systems will be highly compromised. In addition to high vax rates, if you want to call it vax, all these things. I was talking with Dr. Lawrence Sellen. I don't know if you know Dr. Sellen, but he's a retired Green Beret. He's also a medical doctor, and then he became a biological warfare expert. And I was with him in Netherlands and other places. And I said, Lawrence, I mean, what's going to happen when the compromised immunity from these shots hits compromised immunity from malnutrition? He goes, well, that's what we're talking about. Because that's, it's one immunocompromised situation packed on top of another. And the only way we'll know is to watch time unfold. But, and the thing is when you're cold, you need more food, right? And that's one of the first things you learn about cold weather warfare is you got to be well fed. If you don't have your nutrition, that cold's going to smack you down. I mean, cold is like, I don't care how Navy SEALish you are or whatever. You're not going to get through that cold without a big brain and being prepared, right?
So this is why you're referring to this as gigacide.
Oh
This
yeah.
is,
I mean,
yeah.
we're looking at it. I mean, at some point it comes down to mathematics. There's just not like, for instance, I arranged for a dinner with a retired CEO of a huge chemical plant in Netherlands. And I arranged for that dinner with Jordan Peterson. I had 2 dinners with Jordan Peterson when he came over. We spent a couple of days, and so we talked with this retired CEO who made nitrogen-based fertilizers for his career, and we wanted to hear what he said about what situation is being created globally. And he said, "Well, I mean, India and Brazil are highly dependent on these production processes in Europe. We have 26 plants across Europe, and not his company, but 26 major nitrogen based, and all of them are either closed down or mostly closed down. As of about a month ago, about 70% was closed down. But we don't really know the numbers because they're being guarded, right? But that number would be lower now. Like the CEO was saying, you have to create this fertilizer 365 days a year, except for those times when you do the annual maintenance. Each plant will do their annual maintenance, but it's not a big deal because, we got all these other plants, right? And he said, so what you're doing is you're creating that fertilizer all year long and you're shipping it out. You don't keep it in one giant warehouse somewhere. You're getting it out there. And then, for instance, when farmers fertilize, some of them do it in November. It's the first one or second one, I guess. I don't know. I'm not a farmer, but they'll fertilize at different times of the year, and it needs to be in place, right? So you can't just like rush it out there. So the farmers have it stocked up, and when the farmers are ready in their own sort of farm in their own climate, then they do it, right? But that's just not going to be there, and it's just not being created. And so it's not good. So look what happened in Sri Lanka when they went organic. Last time I went to Sri Lanka, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago, 6, I don't remember, but there was a lot of food there. Sri Lanka was like, no problem. I'm always looking for food security when I go to places because this is obviously pandemic, famine, war. They go together. And as a war correspondent, I'm watching every day. When I wake up, I have my alerts for H5N1, for typhus. For instance, we see typhus increasing in California, which I watch typhus because that goes along with malnutrition. It goes along with homelessness. It goes along with, so we see typhus strangely increasing. I had an epidemiologist yesterday contact me about that. In fact, when we get offline, I need to call him up. And these things compound on each other. The hungrier you get, the more you migrate to some place. Many people migrate, some don't. A lot of people you'll find when you read, whether it's in the Holodomor in Ukraine, 32, 33, or in Mao's famines, or in Hungerwinter in 44, 45 in Netherlands, or the Irish famines, 1940, 45 to 52, depending on how you count. Some people say to 1950 or 1850, but it doesn't matter. But the bottom line is you'll see a lot of people at the beginning, when it becomes a hunger issue, they're wandering around, they're looking for food, they're foraging, that sort of thing. They start carrying spoons a lot, interestingly. And then finally, when people get really hungry, they're really actually literally starving, they'll actually tend to go home if they haven't migrated somewhere. Like this is why we ended up, they'll actually go home and die at home often. Like a cat does that as well, right? And people will tend to go.
Yeah.
Yeah, like if dog gets hurt, he's going to run home. Cat does that, right? And people will do that too. We do it too. Actually, when I was covering Hong Kong fighting, I was showing people how to track down wounded people because a lot of the guys I was out with were getting wounded all the time by all kinds of stuff. I covered that for 7 months. And I started telling people, this is how you find people, because we react just like our injured deer does. People, when they get injured, I'm talking physical injury, like a gunshot or something. It wasn't gunshots. It was like bricks and stuff like that. And rubber bullets, like I cleverly got hit with twice. They hurt. But when people are bleeding, if you follow that blood, it's almost always going to go to like a wall. It'll go to a corner. It'll go to the ATM area where it's an enclave, because people will tend to go next to a tree or something. If they can, they won't stay in the open. They will. We behave the same way. We'll go get under a log. We'll go find a cave. Anything to get we react. Our survival instincts kick in, and we go find cover, right? Or you'll go home if you can get home, right? And you'll see that also in famine when you're really starting to crash. A lot of people who actually die of actual starvation or famine fevers, they'll actually die in their bed at home. So that's quite interesting. But a lot of this is highly avoidable. At this point, I don't see global famine as being avoidable at this time. I don't see how we can avoid. I think we can still mitigate it. That's clear by continuing to prepare. Keep in mind, there's 2 major types of famine that I've read about. I've never seen them classified. There needs to be a PhD study on famine, and there needs to be the same on pandemic. We've got all the virologists and the bacteriologists and the mycologists and all that stuff, epidemiologists. But there needs to be a PhD course study on pandemic itself, because pandemic itself is its own thing. After having read 60 books on it, I can talk here for weeks, you know. Likewise with famine, it's its own thing once it gets going, and they are together. They go together, and war does. And the human osmotic pressure, you got that triangle of death, and then you got the tent peg is that is like a pyramid, right? A human osmotic pressure that causes people to move, which spreads the disease, which actually can spread hunger, and these things will go up to some point, and then they'll begin to abate. But so what you'll find is as we go into this, certainly by 2023, there's going to start to be very obvious famines. And now, let me go back to, there's two major types of famines that I have noticed in my study. There needs to be a PhD study in famine. I would go and get my PhD in it. Actually, at this point, I might be somebody that's teaching the very first classes at some point. I mean, but the famines that I've noticed are, I call them a light switch famine, which is one like the Hungerwinter of 1944-45 in Netherlands. That's where the Nazis came in and they sort of shut off the food. And they didn't sort of shut off the food. They shut off the food. And they had a cold winter, right? And so these things that we were parachuting in food and getting airplanes shot down and that sort of thing. And finally, our ancestors did D-Day and Market Garden and all those, freed the. So that famine only lasted roughly 6 months, depending on how you count. So it was like light switch on, famine for about 6 months, light switch off. Now we got food again, right? But that's not how most of them go. Most of them are a very slow flash to bang. And the people who are paying attention, who have studied this, can actually see it. Because you'll see this in every case. There'll be some people that are like, oh, I see what's actually happening here. This isn't just a normal, hey, we got to increase some food prices this year because there was a drought in California or whatever, or in northern Mexico and Texas and Italy and 50% of Europe. I mean, because we actually could get through that without famine, right? It would be, we're going to have the higher food prices, or the Mississippi problems that we're having now with the low water in the Mississippi is causing problems with shipping food and shipping fertilizer up and down the Mississippi. Mississippi is vital for the United States economy. But you can see all these conditions because it's about conditions. It's not about sparks. People often, they when they ask me about war, what will be the spark? And I always say sparks are amateur questions. Spark is you're like revealing an amateur question. It is not that that's a bad question. It's a smart question, but it's really about conditions, right? Conditions. When you create the conditions for a forest fire, because it's just been a drought, dry for 2 years or something, and the forest is bone dry, any spark will do. And there's always sparks. I mean, so you're, cigarette or whatever, lightning strike, something. And so then comes the big forest fire from some little spark. But it didn't really come from the spark. It came from the conditions, right? Because any spark will do, and there's always sparks. But, down in the Darien Gap, where I spend so much time in the jungle of Panama, it's a rainforest. You can have an entire firework factory blow up in that rainforest. Nothing's going to happen. It's just going to smoke for a while. It'll burn for a day or two, and then the rain will knock it down, and you'll be like, well, that was a nice firework factory. It's gone now. And, and there's a hole in the jungle. But that's it. It's not going to burn down. Likewise with famine. Likewise with war. Likewise with pandemic. It's about conditions, right? And you'll hear people, well, not to go into the terrain theory and all that. That's the whole stuff. But with famine, it's about conditions. Conditions are being set now. Conditions are being set by attacking farmers in Canada, attacking farmers in Netherlands, Germany, and the United States, putting solar panels across their farms, putting thousands of ridiculous windmills everywhere. I'm calling them ridiculous. That's what they clearly are, right? And maybe in some places they're actually great offshore where they've got huge amounts of wind. Here in Great Britain, there are some places where they probably make perfect sense. But in a lot of places, I just see them out there sitting still day after day, right? And monuments to stupidity. And those windmills, I don't care how fast they turn and how long they turn, they can't make nitrogen-based fertilizers. And nor can nuclear power plants. You can have all the nuclear power plants in the world, and they will not make the Haber-Bosch process work, right? You have to have the natural gas or coal gas, basically natural gas, right? And so it's about conditions. Natural gas, the switches are being cut off, right? Highly vulnerable. This is an infrastructure war, the Ukraine war. It's actually larger than that. I mean, there's so much infrastructure out there that is so vulnerable, whether it's the Panama Canal, Suez Canal, undersea cables, satellites, EMP. I mean, we're clearly in a state of war, a serious state of war. And we have, again, the Bank of England is about to fall. It looks like it anyway. We'll see collapse. This, I've seen this happen. For instance, when the communism fell apart and everybody's pensions were gone in places like Poland, where I lived for 2 years during that period. And people keep saying, "Oh, it's okay. I've got a government pension." I'm like, you don't know how this works. That is not how this works. And the same with these wars. You keep comparing sensors to our jets versus their jets and all this. And we got better radars, blah, 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 blah. And they cut the pipeline, right? And now you're cutting your trees down, right? And they're not going to work. They're green anyway, right? and you're simply going to freeze this winter, and you're not going to have fertilizer for next year. And you're going to go into famine in 2023. And in 2024, you'll be lucky if Europeans aren't eating each other. And I'm saying that with full seriousness. I'm not zero hyperbole. They'll be very lucky if there's not cannibalism by the end of 2024 or winter 2024, 2025. Because remember, that second sort of famine, the slow build, that slow flash to bang, those tend to be the really big ones, right? They tend to be, if you read about the Irish famine, read Black Potatoes or read The Famine Plot. That's a good book. That's the one I'm starting to read a second time. And the Famine Plot, you'll see it really starts to kick in 1845, right? And then some people see it and they do, some mechanisms to help abate and assuage the issues, but it doesn't work. And so now by 1846, it's really getting bad. 47, okay, it's game on. 48, game on, right? And people are dying in huge numbers. People are jumping on ships and sailing to the United States and other places. And that's why we ended up with so many. That's one of the reasons we ended up with so many Irish. Not the only reason, but it was because they needed to leave. That's why you got Irish down in South America so much, like in Argentina, and so many Irish down in places like New Zealand and Australia, right? Because they human osmotic pressure.
And tons here in America as well.
That's right. That's right. Because of the famine, right? I mean, it's demographically transformative.
Absolutely. So, Michael, with you mentioned that a lot of people, they're just not paying attention. At the beginning, we're talking about you're in Ireland and people are just going out drinking, they're having fun, they think that everything is basically normal. It's like, oh, okay, there's no more COVID restrictions, so life is normal again. Whereas you are someone that you've studied this, and that's, I think, what really sets you apart is you've studied all the conditions. You focus on the conditions, and you're saying, look, every single condition is building up for this. It's like someone who looks at forest fires. They're not going and saying, well, I found 6 different teens that were lighting off fireworks in the woods. They don't care about that. They're saying, look, you haven't cleared the forest properly in this long. It's dry. The weather did this. Anything that happens is going to light this thing up. And so I'm seeing similar signs and I'm taking actions against it. Right? And I'll tell folks, I apologize if you hear a kind of little bit of a thumping sound in the background. We're having a well dug right now. So there's, maybe you don't hear it, but there's a slight thumping sound because, I've got a little solar generator, to run 220 well pump, and we're getting a well because if the city water shuts off for any reason, like I need to have my own well, I need to have my own fire, right? Water, heat, need that to do everything. So with America though, I'm seeing a similar situation. Most people, if I talk to them, they say, hey, look, food shortages could be really serious. There could be famine. They're like, well, I go to the grocery store, same amount of food there. Yeah, it's more expensive and the eggs I like aren't there anymore. My favorite bacon's no longer there. So for America, Europe, it's easy to see, especially heading into the winter, how there will be an immediate impact on the way of life in Europe. It feels like America is much more insulated. And right now, going back again to the grocery stores, we're still eating last year's food for the most part. What do you see things like in America in 2023, in 2024? And I'll add one more point to that, which is you mentioned that if we take the right actions now, we can really correct and maybe prevent some of the bad things from happening. But unfortunately, what we're seeing with not just Biden, but a lot of these European politicians, people all over the world, it's almost as if they're taking intentionally the exact opposite effect, right? Whereas in World War I, World War II, you had the American government saying, here's how to plant your gardens. Here's how to can food. They were teaching people. Now they're saying, well, here's how to transition your daughter into a girl or into a boy, right? That's where things are at now. So where do you see things, how do you see things playing out over the next couple of years in America? And also, can you differentiate with how things might be different in, say, the center of a blue city, like I'm in Ohio, like Columbus or Cincinnati, which is a dense population, very blue city, blue police, at the higher levels, everything, versus the rural. So I'm in very rural Ohio. So how do you see that playing out in the big cities versus the rural areas in America over the next 1 or 2 years?
Social collapse. I mean, that's quite clear. It's a collapse of a complex system. And like, for instance, right now in France, which is a couple of hours by train from here, they are, well, there are strikes going on and they have gas shortages. So you have people lining up right now. In fact, I just had a couple of dinners with Andy No. Andy No
Oh yeah,
had to
yep.
move from Portland and he moved to London. In fact, had dinner with him last night. And his cousin just went back to, we went to a museum with them last week. And very, very smart guy, Andy. And his cousin just went back to London, and she reported back last night about how bad it's getting. Like, can't get gasoline, long lines, people fighting, and that sort of thing, right? And one of the things that's quite interesting is when you get into these situations, the reaction to the situation actually makes it worse. Like, for instance, let's say one of those club fires where there's a fire in the club and people get stuck in the doorway and everybody dies because everybody tried to get out at once. Whereas if you just slowed down, slow as smooth and smooth as fast, everybody would have just got right out 30 seconds later and nobody would have died. But this is what happens in these situations. For instance, 1922-ish in Germany, there's a great book called When Money Dies. Weimar Germany, when the economy started going very badly, people started going on strike, which made the economy go more badly, which made more strikes. And that's what we see in France. United States rail workers may go on strike in November, right? I think that they probably will, actually, just based on things, but I don't know. I think that they probably will go on strike, and that'll be very, very, very damaging to the United States, along with the Mississippi just being fairly dry at the moment, which is causing that's a huge deal. A lot of people don't realize how important that Mississippi is for our well. One of the blessings that the United States has is we have a tremendous amount of rivers and waterway systems, which they just don't have in Europe to that extent. I mean, they got the Rhine River and that sort of thing and a few others, but not like we have. I mean, we've got like arterial flows all over the place, right? And right now, one of the main one, the Mississippi, is fairly dry. It's still flowing, but it's the amount of cargo that can go is reduced. That happened this year on the Rhine, which happens fairly often on the Rhine, but it was more intense this year. And now it's flowing again, thankfully. It was always flowing, but it reduced the amount of cargo that could go. But the bottom line is all these conditions, these various conditions, which normally we can get through this and we can get through that, but we clearly see various governments like in Netherlands, United States, I call it OGUS, Occupying Government of the United States, Canada, likewise, Australia, these governments who are clearly intentionally sabotaging their own country. Germany, the German Greens and globalists are absolutely committing suicide, which is kind of a German thing anyway. They'll do their Gotterdammerung. You might, if you've heard of Gotterdammerung, it's like their old mythology from Norse mythology, where they have like 3 super cold winters followed by famine. The Germans tend to replay this mythological firmware. I actually brought it up to Jordan Peterson when he was here, and some others from time to time. I'm like, I lived in Germany for 4 years. I speak German. In fact, I did an interview in German recently in Austria. and I was surprised I could do it. But anyway, but I have studied Germany quite a lot, and that is I mentioned to Steve Bannon recently. I said, the biggest danger to Europe is actually not Russia; it's actually Germany. I mean, Germany is the one country that could just stand up and stop this, right? But they're not. I mean, they're talking about shutting down their 3 remaining reactors. They keep vacillating on that, even while they're going into this situation. They're talking about, they've signed a deal with Canada to produce hydrogen, Canada to use windmills. This is like crazy to use their windmills in Canada and ship hydrogen to Germany. Okay, come on, Rambo. Listen, hydrogen to heat homes and that sort of thing. That's hydrogen is rocket fuel, right? That's what they use for shoot rockets into space. Anything that's rocket fuel, I don't want it to be used to heat my home, right? And it's the leakiest thing on Earth. Like they keep trying to launch the Artemis rocket and they keep having these hydrogen leaks. As somebody who grew up in Florida and like addicted to rockets since I was a little kid, and I would go to watch the space shuttle launch and that sort of thing. And it's been scrubbed again due to a hydrogen leak all the time, because hydrogen is those tiny little H2 molecules that just leak. There's nothing that leaks quite like hydrogen. Just remember what I'm telling you. When you watch rocket launches and they'll be like, T minus 8 minutes and holding, there seems to be a reduction in the hydrogen pressure in tank number so and so. And they'll be like, oh, yeah. And they'll be, oh, sorry, it's scrubbed, have a hydrogen leak. And so they're talking about using hydrogen for the energy source across Europe. There's going to be homes and apartment buildings blowing up everywhere. I mean, it's like you just can't make up this stuff. And they're talking about making it over. And they're not that stupid. They're not that stupid. They're clearly doing a gigacide. They say it. This isn't conspiracy theory. They say it with their mouths. They say it on the at the World Economic Forum website. They're releasing wolves around Europe. Like right now, the wolves just ate some German politician, ate her horse about 3 weeks ago, I'd say. And it's like real wolves, like big bad wolves. They're releasing in Netherlands now, in Germany, and some of the farmers will tell you, well, this is another one of their ways they're trying to run us off their farm. One farmer, it was actually Jordan, he said, with his Dutch accent, that guy's like 12 feet tall. He's like 12. You can't believe how tall that guy is. It's like, I'm like, man, come down and talk to me, And so he's like, but Jordan's like, they're releasing these wolves. That's just another mechanism to run us farmers out of here. He said the wolves are more protected than the damn queen. They're more protected than the damn queen. And I think he doesn't like the queen. But and he keeps sending me photos of wolves that have killed sheep and these sorts of things, and killing people's cows and anyway, there's all these, and you look on the World Economic Forum website and you can see, they talk about releasing wolves, but what they seem to be doing as part of a larger information war is to make people afraid of the wilderness, to make people afraid of Mother Nature. Now, I'm going somewhere with this. I read so many books and I talk with so many people and I see so many things in my travels. It's clear that the globalists, are trying to make people move into cities. Like, for instance, Tri-State City in Netherlands. It's part of Netherlands, Belgium, and Germany, right? Tri-State City, you can see maps of it. They're trying to take away the 62% of the farmland in Netherlands at the farmers zone and take that and form Tri-State City and basically pull people all into these cities under complete control, smart cities. Like Dublin is now a smart city. There's a smart city in Netherlands. They have printed meat at the restaurant. I didn't eat it, but I bought it and photographed. It's gross. Printed, they call it meat. It's not meat. It's print lab grown gook, and then they make it look like it's meat, right? And that's they want to get rid of they want to make us afraid of nature. You go to NASA at Kennedy Space Center. I went over there with one of my a former Army officer, a friend of mine, and we went over there and we were just doing a tour. We're just like picking up what we can pick up, and he notices stuff sometimes is extraordinary. And he's like, look at all these astronauts, look at all the Apollo astronauts, and look at their backgrounds. These are kids from especially Ohio and places like that. They were like kids that were playing out. They're always talking about their Boy Scouts. They were doing this out in the woods. They were kids that got their fingers and hands and toes dirty and climbing trees and falling out of them and stuff, right? I mean, these are kids that are very, very happy out in the woods or very happy out fishing or something, and then they become astronauts. And oh, I'm sorry, somebody's here actually. I'm busy right now. I'm busy right now. Sorry.
Well, Michael, I know you also have
Yeah.
a cutoff approaching with the next, say, 15, 20 minutes, but maybe if you
Hold on.
can, if you can,
Sorry.
just you kind of getting back to the picture of America, over the course of, say, 2023, 2024, what do you think life will look like in America based on all the conditions that you're seeing being set right now?
2023, 2024, I mean, clearly it's going to be rough. It's clearly, especially as we get through, we still have a lot of food that's already been grown and that sort of thing. And the reason why somebody's at the door, I'm at an Airbnb. I don't know what's going on. It's one of those random things that happens. It's like random. And so, and so, but 2024, it's clear there's going to be, I spent a lot of time down in Colombia and Panama watching the flows through Mexico, the migration flows, and they're quite intense. We have no borders now in the United States. Clearly, this is all set up. I was down in Panama when Secretary Mayorkas came down there, and this 3 Blackhawks landed right in front of me. I was making video. Actually, they're increasing the flows of the migrants who are coming through Africa, who are coming through Asia and South America, and they're coming through Panama, right? And these flows are being increased by August, the occupying government of the United States. I mean, this is a clear sabotage. They're giving phones out to these quote unquote migrants. They're invaders. Mostly they're military age males. And they are, what they can do with these phones, right? They can send money to your phone and they can give you instructions, right? And they can track where you're at and they can send you, hey, go over here and do this action. And here's some money on your phone for being there, by the way. Thank you for your service, right? That's clearly what they're doing. Some of us have been warning about it for a while. And there was just a report yesterday about they're giving these phones out to $82 million, I think, worth of phones so far. That was in the report that I saw yesterday. That is a custom made army, that's just like completely all over the place. We have to close our borders and begin mass deportations, period. And people say, you can't say that. That's racist. I'm like, get out of my face. We need to do mass deportations. This is war. We're at war. We're going to end up in a war. We're going to end up in famines. This is no joke. Somebody recently contacted me about a week and a half ago about doing some business on some videos I made in one of the wars. And he signed his official letter from his company with he and him pronouns or whatever, he, him, or whatever. And I'm like, I don't want to do business with you. I'm not playing around anymore. I'm not going to just ignore it anymore and go, well, that's just you. No, I don't want to have anything to do with you. If you're going to throw your pronouns at the end of a business letter, bye. We're not doing business, right? We're at war. PayPal just did what they just did, threatening to take money straight from people's accounts. I'm going to keep my PayPal account open. Hopefully they'll cancel me and it'll, put me in a position to do something else, right? But this is the thing. It's clear that we are in a state of war and we need to start acting like it, right? We need to stop ignoring this. We need to stop saying, well, that's just dumb. No, it's unacceptable. Cancel can go both ways. I'm not going to do business with somebody who signs a letter with their preferred pronouns. I'm not going to be a player in your mental illness, right? Just not going to do it.
It's an important point that we have to do the same canceling on our end. Now, with all this, obviously, this paints a pretty grim picture, unfortunately, which is just reality, right? Like, we shouldn't have our heads in the sand. But is there hope? Like, from what you see, America, we've got a survival spirit. The human nature is one of survival when it really gets down to it. So, do you think that the evil is going to succeed and in 10 years it's going to look like the Hunger Games? Or is there something that gives you hope that the human spirit can really overcome this and that we can triumph in the end?
I think there's going to be a huge amount of death, but that we will triumph because you can see we're rising up now. For instance, I can feel it in me. I can feel it in the people that are around me. For instance, when I get a letter that's signed with he and him or whatever, I'm like, I'm not doing business with you. But even 2 or 3 or 4 years ago, I'd be like, well, it's kind of whatever, but it's just, we'll just do business and you'll be you and I'll be me. Now I'm just like, no, finished. We're not going to talk about it. They keep bringing new gun legislation. In the past, I'm like, okay, let's hear your side of the story. Now I'm like, no, I've heard your side of the story. There's no gun. No, I don't want any more common ground. I don't want to find common ground with you. We have no common ground. You are the enemy. You are cutting us. You're destroying our country. You've opened the borders up. You're destroying cities across America. You're allowing people to burn cities down. No, unacceptable.
It's really about having a war mindset and shifting into that and realizing that we have to be taking action to fight against this because we are at war. And that's the thing is a lot of people, they look at, war and think, oh, well, there's no bombs falling on America. And well, you look into unconventional warfare, you look at their practices, we've been under attack for a very, very long time, let alone the past couple of years with the COVID pandemic. So that's helpful. And there's some part of you hearing you say that inspires me to feel like that's like, yeah, like I'm at war. If they're going to say, hey, put a mask on, it's like, nope, whatever it is, it's like, we can't comply with this anymore because especially with the
Right.
polite Americans, it's us peacefully complying and saying, well, I don't want to rustle feathers. I don't want to be the one that gets called out. We can't do that anymore. And the more of us, I think, that stand up against it and don't just go along to get along, as they say,
Yeah.
then the more that we're going to just rise up as people. And ultimately, that's what they're afraid of. Everything that I've done and all my research points me to one simple fact: the globalists, that small percentage of people, their greatest fear is us. And that's why they've put so much energy into pacifying us and lying to us and convincing us that we're not in control. But actually, we are. But it just takes enough of us standing up and saying, nope, no more. This is it.
That's why they have to. That's why they have to cancel our social media, cancel on PayPal, threaten to steal money from our PayPal accounts, and basically stealing from us constantly, right? And we're like the mahout on top of we're the elephant. They're the mahout at this point. I lived in Thailand for years, and one thing you'll occasionally see in the news is another mahout smashed by the elephant, right? People abuse the elephant once too many and they get flattened because the bottom line is that elephant actually is in charge, right? you know and he only willingly does what you do as long as you don't push too far, right? There's, it might be an old Indian parable from India, that the elephant in the chain, right? So a baby elephant, you have its leg tied to a stake with a chain, and then as it gets older, you can just keep the chain there, but you don't have to keep the stake because the elephant just assumes that it can't go anywhere when it's got a chain around its leg. You know, you'll hear Indians mention that sometimes. I spent a year in India. They've got a lot of. I think it came from India, but that's where I've heard it. And it's true with our population as well. We're too compliant. And we're Americans. You know what I mean? We don't have to put up with this. I mean, our forefathers foresaw what happens now, what is happening now. They foresaw it, and it's written in the Constitution. That's why the enemy, and let's call them what they are. They are the enemy, right? They're not opponents. They're not people we want to find common ground with. The enemy's not off in Asia somewhere. It's not off in Europe. The enemy is in the United States, right? And the enemy is clearly destroying our way of life and trying to take. They are actual using Nazism. When I say that, I'm not going over the top with that, because what is Nazism? Nazism is fascism. Let's define fascism. Many people define it different, variously, but if we go with this definition, fascism is when the government and the private industry become fused together like salt water, right? They become a solution, right? I mean, they become this third thing, salt water, right?
PayPal
And
canceling you for your political views is fascism.
that's fascism, right? And exactly. Or or Facebook doing similar things, or participating in information warfare, or supplying intelligence from their users and that sort of thing. That's literal fascism in the true purest sense. Now, what is Nazism? Nazism is taking fascism and adding a racial component, right? So that's what the Nazis did. They just basically took fascism, which is left wing, by the way. Everybody's like, Nazis are right wing. No, they're not. That's what you communists say. But yeah, because all you guys fight over what's left and right, but you're all on the very authoritarian left, right? And so, maybe he's right of you, but you're all deeply left. And Nazism is left wing, period. That blows people's mind when you say that. It's just the fact. And fascism plus racism is Nazism. That is exactly what PayPal is doing.
And the target is you and I, white males especially.
Right? Nazi pal, Nazi pal, right? I mean, that's what it is. I mean, that's literally what it is. It's become that pathetic. But remember what happened to the Nazis, right? They're gone, right? Well, they're still hanging around, obviously. That first generation is gone. The Ku Klux Klan made different iterations, by the way. They formed after the Civil War. President Grant, then smashed them down, and then they sort of abated for a while, and they resurged in the teens, in the 20s, and then they sort of abated for a while. They kind of come and go, right? Right now, there's like the number of actual Ku Klux Klan in the world that have more than 5 teeth in their head would probably fit, on one bus. There's really not that many right now, but it is something that you don't just clean it up and it's gone. You have to weed the garden. You know what I mean? You have to stay on it. And that's the problem that we've had, is we didn't stay on it. We were polite and we let the weeds grow, right? While they installed university professors throughout the United States and Europe and Asia, and continued to install people in police forces, mayors all over the place. And we're taking it back. I mean, we're deaf because we're awake now. I mean, I'm on different groups and I can see, I've never seen so much energy, positive energy on, hey, we're going to get them here on this election. We're going to, left wingers are getting fired now. You come up with that he, her stuff and he, him and pronoun stuff. Like, I'm not even going to do business with that guy after he signed his letter like that. It's just like, that's it. That's simple. I don't need your money. You know what I mean? I'd rather be poor. You know what I mean? It's like, I'm going to be poor anyway. If I do business with people like you, I'll be poor and dead.
Yeah. Well, I think this is an opportunity for us to build our own parallel economy, to reject all that and return to our roots and traditions, and reject this modern satanic agenda. And you're right. It's what people are doing. And so I think that even though that, there's some tough times ahead, as you say, people will die. Yes, that's nature. That's human. The course of humanity is the rise and fall of civilizations and et cetera. That ultimately, though, we're waking up to a very, very long slumber. And that's their greatest fear, the globalist greatest fear. But I think that we're going to continue. And I think that, America, we do have some difficult times ahead of us. But I share your same confidence that we absolutely will succeed in the end. And the more we can prepare now and really step into this war mindset, the more ready we're going to be, the quicker we can react to what they bring at us. And ultimately, that's going to lead to our victory. So, Michael, I think that's a good note to end on. I want to just ask you before we end, where can people find you? Because I know that you and we're constantly messaging back and forth, which I really appreciate. But I want the people watching to have access to your brain, because it's an incredible brain.
Thank you, sir. I'm on locals.com every day, and I'm doing a Gifts and Go now, because since 2005, I've been reader supported. I've never taken advertisements. I've never done anything like that. So totally, that's how I'm able to do things like go to Europe for 4 months, or spend 5 or 6 months in the jungles down in Panama and whatnot, tracking the migration, however long that was. But you can't do that when you work for somebody. They won't give you an open-ended, oh, now you're with a different Indian tribe. You know what I mean? What I mean? You see these. I was doing that during the wars a lot, during Iraq and Afghanistan and other places, Thailand, and Hong Kong. I would go open-ended, and I had such flexibility. I had a friend that worked for ABC, And he's like, oh, I long to be like you, because we would be together in Iraq and Afghanistan at times. And he would go, you can just pick up a hint and know that you should follow that, but I can't do it. I got to get it cleared through the mouse. He called it Mickey Mouse on ABC. He goes, I got to get it cleared through the mouse, and it's a mean mouse, Michael. And he goes, that mouse is so mean. And we pick up this hint, and you can just go jump on a helicopter and go do it. I have to get it cleared, and it's too late. And that's
you're almost like what the Chinese would call a wandering Tao, or the monks that would just wander across China in the ancient days and just go wherever nature told them to go. It's incredible.
That's basically it. You follow your nose.
Great. And also I would encourage people to also follow you on Truth Social, right? I know you're also pretty active. And what is your handle on Truth Social?
On Getter, it's Michael Yon 1776, and I think it's the same on Truth Social. I think it's the same
on Truth Social. Yep.
Yeah.
And once I post this video, I'll tag you, and that way you're on there as well. So anybody that's following me can then find your handle that much easier. So, Michael, I really appreciate you taking this time with me. I always enjoy catching up with you, and I think that we'll probably have to have more of these updates, especially as we head into the winter. But just a reminder to folks to chop your firewood, get your stoves in, get your water secured, because especially for those of you in Europe, I'm praying for you all.
Yeah, I'll be back in Texas soon. Thank you, Seth.
All right. Thank you, Michael. Take care.
Bye-bye.